Good afternoon, everyone. If we can take our seats, we will begin our forum on this lovely wet Wednesday that we have. My name is Jen Lemberger, and I am a librarian here at Central Library, and a very, even more so than normal, big thank you for coming out to our League of Women Voters Forum on such an inclement weather day. So you guys are the intrepid crew that made it here, so thank you for being here for this event. One announcement in particular that I want to make for this crowd here, we have regular technology classes for adults at 11 a.m. on Tuesdays. This coming Tuesday, March 27th, the topic is related to our April League of Women Voters Forum. So it is titled Operation Information Evaluating News Sources. So this is about, sort of the plethora of fake news sources and the bots and whatnot that are online. And so March 27th at 11 a.m., our digital librarian, Cassidy Charles, will be teaching that class for anyone who wishes to join. So please feel free to see us there. We have a couple other flyers that are on the back table, along with the League of Women Voters information materials, and one of them is we are now having our calendar of events for everyone to take home. Our online materials are not always available for everyone. They don't always have access, and so this is another way that you can take all of the wonderful events home with you and put it on your fridge and circle all the things that you want to go to. So these are on the back table. Please take one with you as you exit the forum today. But wanted to particularly thank the League of Women Voters Forum for this event today, as it's an extremely important issue for our voting rights and enfranchisement for all of us. And with that, I will introduce Lindsay Baker to take us into the afternoon.
We would like to thank the Santa Barbara Public Library for co-sponsoring this forum with our League of Women Voters. Also, thank you to Gary Atkins Sound Systems and Olivia, working for Sylvia today, translating. This forum is being recorded by TVSB and will be available on Channel 17. You may check on their website under On Demand, then Video. Then you can check the schedule to see when this video will be aired in both English and Spanish. It will also be on our League website eventually. It takes a little while for us to get it posted. If you are interested in learning more about our League or becoming a member, you can speak to Bev, who is at the desk where you entered, and she has a channel voter, a newsletter, and information about the League, and is happy to talk to you about it. I want to thank Connie Hanna and Penn Borden, and there are others who will be thanked by the moderator for setting up this forum. Our next forum, and thank you, Jen, for mentioning it, in April, that'll be April 18th, will be Fake News, Will Our Democracy Survive? I'd like to make a few announcements. We're circulating a petition for the State League of Women Voters, and the petition is for a constitutional amendment that will fix loopholes in Proposition 13. If you would like to sign the petition or find out about this, you can talk to Colin Jones or Joni Jones. They'll be in the back later, and you can talk to them about it. It's called Schools and Communities First. Now I'd like to introduce Susan Horn, who is our voter service person and would like to tell you about what we're doing regarding the upcoming election.
I am so amazed that we're here. Especially me. Thank you for coming. I just want to tell you that there are voter registration forms in the back, and I would recommend that you take one or two, and if you're registered, find a friend, the assistant at your dentist's office, anybody who you think might enjoy being asked if they would like this, to register to vote. So please take them. And the other thing is, there's a what's on the ballot pink sheet, which will tell you all the offices that are up for election in June. And the last thing is, a lot of people don't know yet that last year, teens can register to vote at age 16 and 17. And then they pre-register, and then they can start to vote at 18. They'll get the voter guide and the ballot in the mail at the appropriate time. So if you want to know about that, it's this. If you know a teenager, take this to them, and also take a registration form. And one of the signs says, I am 16 or 17, I want to pre-register. So, thank you.
I'd like to introduce Marty Bloom, who you all know as a former mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, and she will be our moderator today. Thank you.
I, like Susan, and I'm amazed there are people here, actually. I looked outside this morning and thought, this isn't good. This is not going to work. But, it is good because it's rain. We need the rain. But it's kind of one of those days you like to hunker down at home. So thank you all for being here. It's really a good. We have today I am very excited. I know I will be learning things today, which is really an amazing thing, although I do try to learn things every time I go out, but this is going to be really interesting in a lot of ways. The league members, first of all, let me just get this out of the way because it's very important. The league members who arranged this forum are Penn Borden and Connie Hanna for sure, but David Landecker and Eugene Johnson also. And I attended, I think, one meeting. So that counts, huh? But thank them for their work. We couldn't have a more up-to-date forum. It would be impossible. This subject of the safety of elections is all over the news everywhere because so much is unfolding before us. As league members, the League of Women Voters of the U.S. was founded in the 1920s by the activists who secured voting rights for women. And I know my grandmother was really tickled. She said she was. She got to vote finally, and she was in her 30s. From its inception, the League has been a nonpartisan group, not favoring any party nor any candidate. Instead, the League has always worked to promote values and processes of representative government. We protect and enhance voting rights for everyone, all Americans. Throughout the year, we have worked to support Voting Rights Act, to reform campaign finances, to fight for DC voting rights, to prevent election day barriers, and so on and so forth. A lot of things, among so many issues. All our work has been to promote an open governmental system that is representative, accountable, and responsive. Sometimes it feels like the work of the League is unending, and indeed it is, but it's never uninteresting. Today we're zeroing in on the one issue of security in our elections. Before computers, we were worried about people stuffing the ballot box. I think you've heard that. And I was telling Joe Holland, I grew up in Chicago, and one thing that got me interested in elections is I found out you could vote more than once, which was astounding. And if you wanted a bottle of wine, you could go to your alderman, and he would tell you how to vote. And you go there and vote and bring back your little slip, and he'd give you a bottle of wine. So I thought, it's just truly an amazing thing. Well, that's not how it works these days, luckily. Now with computers, and I really do think computers have changed the way we vote, both in hardware and software. We have, it's a very good thing, but like all good things, it has the yang on the other side where there are some drawbacks, and that's what we're going to hear about today. We do have concerns about interference in our elections by a foreign power. In the League's last several conventions, the League has passed resolutions to make our concerns about election security known at the national level. And everywhere we look, on TV, in books, newspapers, media online, we hear concerns about the activity in our federal elections. We are horrified, I was horrified, and I'm sure you were too, by the indictments of Russian hackers. the revelation of a department in St. Petersburg with at least 80 employees dedicated to hacking the US elections, with direct connections to hacking voter registrations in 21 key states. It was 20 till this morning. I read it in the New York Times. They said 21, so maybe it's even more than that. Who knows? They're figuring it out. The analysis of federal election of 2016 has revealed new ways to mess with our voting rights. Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, and who knows what will be revealed next. At every level, the League of Women Voters has been working on the safety of our election for years and years. So today we have this forum, and I like the title here. How safe are our local elections? So we're going to try to hone in on the local. Today for the forum, we had 3 people for our panel, and I know you don't see 3 people over there right now. If you do, maybe it's that bottle of wine thing going on here. There are really 2 people over there. Dr. Elena Aronova, and I'm not very good at pronouncing her name, so I'm sorry, at the last minute had to bow out. She was very excited about coming here, but she had a personal family emergency. So,
business, government, and military computers. And prior to our election in 2016, they were busily interfering with Estonian, Ukrainian, and European computer systems. The United States, on the other hand, had dropped Russia to a lower priority after the end of the Cold War, and especially after 9/11. From 2001 on, terrorism became the main focus for American intelligence. During the Cold War, for example, American intelligence had devoted 40% of its time and money on Russia. After 9/11, it fell to 10%. Beginning in 2014, the Russian cyber attack objective was to sow discord in the United States political systems by running social media accounts, buying political ads, and staging political rallies. The Russians created hundreds of social media accounts impersonating real and fictitious Americans. Acting as an organization, employers were directed to create, quote, political intensity through supporting radical groups, unquote, and to criticize Clinton, but not her opposition. For example, on Facebook, a Russian company linked to the Kremlin used $100,000 in ads, pushing divisive issues during and after the American campaign. On Twitter, Russians used thousands of fake accounts that regularly posted anti-Clinton messages. Many were bots that often fired off identical messages seconds apart. On an election day, for instance, one group of Twitter bots sent out the hashtag war against Democrats 1,700 times. Further, entities tied to the Russian government, most notoriously the Internet Research Agency, were bankrolling troll farms that spread fake news on Clinton and also created provocative online posts about immigrants, religion, and race. The cyber attacks also zeroed in on hacking computer systems. Before the 2016 election, the Russian hackers made repeated attempts to get into major US institutions, including the White House and State Department. The strategy was to send out volleys of phishing emails and hope that someone clicked. One of those was Joe Podesta, chairman of Clinton's campaign. By mistake, one aide okayed a phishing email and allowed Moscow to access about 60,000 of Podesta's emails. Hackers also breached the Democratic National Committee. These emails were passed on to WikiLeaks. 2 Kremlin-connected groups were behind the hacks, the FAB spy agency and Russian military intelligence. Finally, in June 2016, the Department of Homeland Security officials said individuals linked to the Kremlin attempted to infiltrate election-related computer systems in more than 21 states. Marty says now it's 2021. This onslaught by the Russians continues unabated. The question is, how are we to blunt it? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pam. If you have a question for Pam, we'll just, I think, write them unless there's just a clarification anybody wants to hear? No, okay. Yes. The what? Oh.
I just want to make a point of clarification that the Republican National Committee was also hacked, but their emails were never disseminated by WikiLeaks, Russian, but they were also.
Thank you. And I know that was a question probably off microphone, so let me, yeah. Okay, we'll do that after Joe Holland, I think, but thank you. She reminded me, and this is a true League member here, that it wasn't just the Democrats, the Republicans were also hacked, but it wasn't given out to WikiLeaks to be disseminated. So we want to be fair here, right? There we go. So who better to hear about local elections than Joe Holland? I can't think of anyone. Joe Holland, the Santa Barbara County Clerk, Recorder, Assessor, and Registrar of Voters. I think he has a lot of titles there. He was first elected to the office in March 2002, but he began his successful career in the assessor's office in 1984 when he took a position as real property appraiser, and I think that means that you have run every 4 years since. Is that right? That's amazing. It's like Strom Thurmond or something, but he did it every 6 years, right? Yeah, just like him, right? Joe has a bachelor's degree in business economics and a master's degree in economics, both from UCSB. He graduated from UCLA Executive Program at the Anderson School of Business in 2001 and holds the designation of Certified Public Finance Officer. Active in the community, Mr. Holland serves as a volunteer board member in the FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program, which is really something that touches our hearts right now. A resident of Santa Barbara County since 1978, he and his wife Kathy live in Goleta and have 3 grown children, Scott, Bridget, and Michelle. And we're ready for you, Joe. Thank you.
Well, I'm so happy to see you could all make it here in this rainstorm. Thanks for coming. So the topic here is election security. It's actually a very broad topic, so I'm just going to go through some of the history, try and hit on some things, but if I miss anything, just feel free to ask the question if you have some concern about some segment. The Senate Intelligence Committee had a hearing this morning on election security in Washington, D.C. It was a bipartisan hearing. Pretty much all the senators agreed that that nothing is more basic than protecting the integrity of our election process. And my job as your county elections official and the staff that I have working in your elections office, we're the front line. We're the front line in protecting democracy, because really elections are all about providing the opportunity to have democracy. Just a couple of announcements. Saw that pink sheet with the different offices on there that are going to be in the ballot in June. Currently, what we're working on is trying to get all of the candidates and all of the offices onto one ballot. We may have to go to 2 ballots for the first time that I've ever experienced in Santa Barbara. And that would be because there's 34 candidates for Senate and something like 27 or 28 candidates for governor. So it's a big, long list. So I thought I'd mention that since we were talking about the June ballot. And then you also mentioned something about Prop 13, and the League of Women Voters is backing an initiative to alter Prop 13, and that would be on the November ballot if it got enough signatures. I've been given a talk to local realtors, and I'd be happy to come back at some time and give a talk here about all the changes to Prop 13. People don't know it, but Prop 13 has actually changed many times over the years. Okay, so let me get started here. I actually was elected to this position in 2002, and I took office in 2003, January. And I had worked in the elections a little bit, but I was mostly an assessor. So after I took office in April of 2003, I had some election vendors, excuse me, come to our office, and they said, oh, look, we have these really nice electronic voting machines. These things are great. You will never have to order paper ballots again. You're going to save so much time, and they're accessible to the disabled, and there were all these benefits to it. Well, I had helped put in place the voting system that we have now. We put it in place in 1999. As you know, it is a paper ballot-based voting system. And I kind of, looked at these guys and go, wow, that's some pretty cool technology, but our voting system's only 4 years old. Why would I want to replace it? And it seems to work really, really well. Best decision I ever made. I gotta tell you. So I'm watching the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing this morning, and they're all saying, well, what we really need to do is make sure that in every state and every county that we have a paper-based voting system that can be fully auditable. So that's what we've been doing. We audit every contest on the ballot for every election to make sure that the reported vote total is accurate as reported by the machine. We have never found a discrepancy. The only discrepancies actually that we do find, it's the people sitting there actually hand counting the vote that get it messed up. But that's a very important thing. So we do have this paper-based, fully auditable voting system. And what was interesting is, I made that decision not to get those electronic voting machines, and then in 2008, they were decertified. I have been to counties where they literally have a warehouse, maybe half the size of this room, filled full of electronic voting machines that they can't use. So then in 2003 also, so in April 2003, I did, said no electronic voting machines. Then I remember in the summer, I was actually down at the beach reading the newspaper, and I was going, oh no, we are going to have a recall election. It really became apparent that in 2003, that was going to be the first election that I, as the elected county officer, was going to have to put in place. And so we did that. That ballot actually had 135 candidates on it. It was wild. So my first election, we ran out of ballots. There were a couple precincts up in Santa Maria where we actually ran out of ballots. Now, we knew that we were going to run out of ballots because you can kind of see that, hey, the stack's getting pretty low. But there's a clause in the election code that says you can get facsimiles. Basically, you just copy the ballot on a piece of paper, and then you can let people vote that way, and then you can take that paper back to the elections office, and under controlled environment, then you duplicate that onto a real ballot. So I was given a talk the other day at Future of California Elections, and they were, wondering what paper ballot voting meant in terms of a continuation in voting. And I said, don't worry about it. You can always continue voting even if you only have a paper-based system. So that was October 2003. Then I get a call from San Jose Mercury News in November of 2003. I was having a pretty exciting first year. The reporter asked me, I'm sitting in my office, he asked me, so, by the way, Mr. Holland, is your voting tabulation system hooked up to the internet? And I said, well, I don't think so. So I got my IT LAN administrator, and we were in the basement of the courthouse back then. And I said, so could you show me? I want to make sure that we're not hooked up to the internet. And so we go in there, we unlock the doors and all that. He points to the machine, see, there it is. And I go, well, it looks like it's hooked up to that computer over there. He goes, yeah, it is hooked up to that computer. That's how we put out the election results at night. And I go, well, is that computer hooked up to the internet? He goes, yeah, that's how we get our election results out at night. Let's unplug that thing. So in 2003, we unplugged the vote tabulation system from the internet. It's interesting. Listen, here it is, 2018. I'm listening to the Senate Intelligence Committee this morning, and they're talking about how important it is to enforce that people don't. I've got a little water here. That people don't. That elections officials don't have their systems hooked up to the internet. Well, we did it back in 2003. So then I started thinking, well, wait a second. This internet security stuff, or this voting security stuff, this is pretty important. So in December 2003, I hired a security firm to come in and do a top to bottom review of our security in our elections process. So they looked at everything. They looked at physical security, software security, fire suppression. They had us suggested that we put cameras up, that we have password protocol. We put in a Halon fire suppression system where we keep our ballots and our computer equipment. Suggested that we double lock up all the voting machines. Backup software for each election that's fully encrypted. All sorts of things. We put in an alarm system. So we had this multifaceted security that we put in place back in 2004. So we were kind of ahead of the times. 2002, we started having, in 2002, you could become a permanent vote by mail voter. So that was a new change. Previously, you had to ask every election. So as the election official, I noted that we were, of course, doing the 1% manual tally where you'd audit the results after the election for 1% of the precincts. But I started noticing this huge increase in voting by mail. And if you go onto one of the charts on the hands out there, you can see the history of voting by mail going back to 2004. And in this last election, 120,000 ballots were cast by mail. It was a huge record. But back in 2004, I was seeing that we had all these vote by mail ballots, and we weren't doing an audit of the results of those. And I saw that that was increasing. So I implemented a procedure, even though the law didn't require me to fully audit all the vote-by-mail ballots by randomly selecting boxes of 200 and having them hand-counted to make sure that the results matched. Then in 2009, they changed the law and said that people need to start doing that. So I was 5 years ahead of the curve in terms of making sure that we were auditing. Well, one of the interesting things with, and it's still with our system, is that when we first got it in 1999, you could actually modem in the results from the polling places on election night. That was pretty nice because you could get the election results in fairly timely, at least the unofficial results. But then they passed a law saying you could no longer modem results in just because they didn't like the look of it. What we used to do is we would take the little election card out of the back of the machine, and we would rerun the results the next day to make sure that they matched what came over the modem. But people didn't like the idea of modeming results, so they outlawed it, which was fine, but then it made it less necessary to have voting machines at the polls. So I started thinking, they had put in all these rules. You had to have all this security tape on the back of each voting machine, and you had to have logs of who you handed it off to. And what we used to do, well, we still do give out election supplies on the Saturday before the Tuesday of the election. Well, we used to also give the poll workers the voting machine, and they would have that at their house for 4 days. Well, you kind of lose a little bit of control that way. And there was a lot of criticism of it. And again, you could no longer modem results, so why are we having these voting machines at the polls? So I made the decision to no longer have voting machines at the polls. Now, if you've been to the polls, although you probably all vote by mail, you just drop your ballot into a ballot box. I called it Back to the Future. And it was funny because Kamala Harris, our senator, on TV this morning, she was saying, I can't believe it's 2018, and I'm saying I want people to have a paper ballot. But it's the best way to secure your elections processes with that paper ballot. So now, we bring all of the ballots back to Election Central. And, they're brought in with the police escort from where the poll workers bring the ballots. Then we got a room full of machines because we still have the old machines. We don't have a high-speed central count, and we just have people stand around sticking the ballots in the machine. And then we walk the computer chip down to the elections tabulation room, and this tabulation room is very secure. It's got cameras in there. There's an electronic entry that only certain people are allowed in there, and you must have 2 people at all time. One person is never allowed in that room by themselves. We have a backup generator, so if we lost power, we can still count the votes, and it's not hooked up to the internet. So one of the things, what was it? It was last year, a year ago. I went to get to UCLA to see a talk by a gentleman named Vint Cerf, CERF. And he was one of the 2 individuals that created the internet from UCLA. There were these 2 guys. They're the ones that developed the protocol to allow for the internet to exist. And his talk was on the Internet of Things, the internet that's hooked up to your toaster, that kind of stuff. So it was an interesting talk. And afterwards, I went up and I said, Mr. Cerf, I'm the county elections official for Santa Barbara County. I said, my question to you is, do you think there will ever be internet voting? And he said, well, we're not there yet. He said, it could happen in the future. Some of these things are like blockchain technology you might have heard about. He said that might allow us to get to the security to where there's a point where we might be able to do it. So I thought that was an interesting comment. And he recommended a book that that I read that I didn't really think was all that good on elections and technology and electronics. So I just kind of banked that away. Then last summer, we had a delegation from Ukraine come to visit our elections office. They wanted to see how we do elections here. And so it was really kind of fun. There was about 10 of them. They had a translator, and we walked them through how we do our elections. And when we got done, then we could ask them some questions. And so Vint Cerf had actually told me that, one of the places where they do voting over the internet is Ukraine. And I went, wow, okay. So I asked these guys, I said, so I understand you guys do voting through the internet. What do you think of that? We don't trust it. So think about that. Are you going to have your government doing voting where you can't pick up that piece of paper and see exactly for yourself how it happened, how it went down? From time to time, I go to elementary schools and teach kids how to vote. And I'll bring in a voting machine, and we'll give them a ballot, and they can vote on like their favorite ice cream, their favorite SUV, their favorite rock band. It's really kind of fun. So then I read off the results, and typically chocolate chip cookie dough wins every time. So I read off the results, we go through it, and so then I explain to them how we do recounts, and I show them the stack of ballots. And I said, now, what if we didn't have those ballots? What if there was a voting machine? These are fifth graders. What if there was a voting machine and we didn't have something where we could go recount this stuff? It could be hacked. You could have a power outage. There could be a virus. Fifth graders. And so when people ask me, Joe, do you think we're ever going to have voting over the internet? I said, when I can convince those fifth graders that it's secure, then I think we're getting close. So some of the things that we're doing right now, in 2016, we had Department of Homeland Security get on if you look at YouTube and watch that hearing this morning, you'll see there was a lot of talk about the Department of Homeland Security in 2016 of August. They had a conference call with a bunch of elections officials. We were on that conference call. There's a lot of criticism of the Department of Homeland Security at the time, that they weren't doing enough, they weren't communicating well, wasn't clear what services they were going to provide. We met separately with the FBI in 2016 and went over everything. We, of course, met with our IT staff and local law enforcement. Not so much for hacking, but also just, physical security. What if something happens at a polling place? How are we going to respond? All that kind of stuff. And then, of course, working with the Secretary of State, they put out guidelines on how to do things. So then recently, we the Department of Homeland Security has gotten a lot better. They actually have different services that they provide now that they make available to counties and state elections. And some of the criticism that I saw this morning was they don't have quite enough resources to actually be providing this to everybody. But we actually had the Department of Homeland Security in our office 2 weeks ago. We actually contracted with them to come on in, try and get into our system. You know, so these are experts. We just go for it. We need to know where we're vulnerable. They could not get into our system from the outside, which was really comforting. Now, that doesn't mean that we give up. We're going to continue to try and harden things from the outside. We're going to do things like, you know, when you go buy like concert tickets or something on the internet and it makes you write in those fuzzy numbers or whatever. There's things like that we can do, because one of the ways that they try and get into your system is through scripts, where they go through your data until they find something. And so if you did a search on our website, it's going to stop you and have you fill in those numbers like that. Little things like that we're that we're working on. Some of the things that we've just recently done is we stopped for all and this is just my department, because I'm concerned about security in my department. The rest of the county's not done this yet, although I think they're going to go there. We've stopped all personal emails. So my staff cannot have a personal email. Even if you tried it, it's not going to come up. So you can go on to Google and hit the Gmail thing and nothing will come up. We stopped them all. So they can still have their county email, but no personal emails. And then you might have heard of dual factor authentication for passwords, where you change your password and then you can change it on your computer, but then you have to dual authenticate that with your cell phone. So there's two things that you have to do in order to change a password. And then we change our password every 90 days. We're required to do that. The hacking from the phishing of DePodesta's email, we had an FBI agent come in and exactly explain what that is. And he says it's really scary, super scary, and you should all be aware of this. He says it mostly happens with real estate fraud. There'll be a realtor, and I'm a licensed realtor, real estate broker, because I provide a lot of services to realtors, so I want to know what's going on. They'll identify a realtor over the internet, and they'll figure out the realtor's email, and they'll phish them and try and get their password to their email. Now that may sound like, well, so what? Then that person who hacked in and has that password to that email, they become that realtor. So now they can send an email out to whoever they want, and they'll think that it's coming from that realtor. So they sit by and they watch these emails, and then they see that this realtor is going to close a deal tomorrow. They send an email to the buyer saying, send your money to this new routing number so we can close tomorrow, urgent. They send the money to the new routing number, and then they go to their realtor and say, so where's the keys? And the realtor says, where's the money? And these people are flat out of luck. So the reason why I tell that story, and well, the FBI agent said the only advice he has to give to those people, file bankruptcy immediately. The reason why I tell that story is that's just money. These are elections. This is democracy. That gives you an idea of what's at stake here. So take it very seriously. We continue to do things on a lot of different fronts. the Department of Homeland Security that came in and could not get to our system from the outside. Then we brought them said, now we're gonna log you into our system. Now they're on the inside. And said, see what you can do. And they found a couple things that we're gonna fix. But that's why we brought them in. Continuing to do things. And that was just a week and a half ago. So we have a whole other list of things that we're gonna do. I'm setting it up with my staff where we're gonna meet periodically and just go over things that we can continue to do and improve upon. I got 3 different offices: elections, clerk, recorder, and assessor. Right now, we're all kind of one thing. We're gonna separate those things off. That's just another example of something we're going to do. And what am I missing? Oh, on the back of your handout. This is something I'm really proud of. And some of you have heard this before. In 2008, there were some precincts in Isla Vista, UCSB, where we had over 100% turnout. That's my job. How about that? That's a pretty good job, huh? So, it was the provisional ballots out there. It really wasn't over 100% turnout. It was just the students would go to the wrong polling place. Maybe it had a smaller line, and they'd ask for a provisional ballot. And because it was a 90% turnout, in general, that all it took were a few students to really go over it, and then all of a sudden you went above 100%. But boy, a lot of people really criticized me for that. But here's the explanation. But what's more important is that in 2008, it's the only contest I've had where I've been taken to court. It was the 3rd district supervisor, and I got taken to court. The election was over in November, I think, and I was in court till February. And I'll just let you guys read it, but there's the judge's comments down at the bottom about the integrity and the accuracy and the thoroughness and all that about your election staff in Santa Barbara County. And so I've always just been really proud about that, and it just goes to show how, in my mind at least, democracy's alive here, and it's secure, and I'm going to continue to do everything I can to keep it that way. So thank you. And happy to have questions. Okay.
So we're going to keep Joe up here. I thought you were going to tell me that the Dailies had moved to Isla Vista or something like that, to know that they're voting more than 100%. Very amazing. No, it's good. It's good that you straightened it out. We have some questions. We have a microphone. Just a minute. Let me have there. Carol Marks has her microphone, and so don't start talking till you get the microphone in your hand. But we have about, looks like 20 minutes or so for questions. Yes.
When an individual is registering, do they have to provide an ID such as a driver's license? And secondly, will they need to present the new real ID by 2020?
To register to vote, you have to use the last 4 digits of your social security number or your driver's license. You don't need to present the actual driver's license document. For real ID, I think if you want to travel, you need to get real ID. I'm going to look into that, but you don't need it to register to vote. So I want to get one because I like to travel.
There. Thank you very much for coming here. Am I too far or too close? That's okay, thanks. My name is James Finkner, and it's a pleasure to hear you. We send off a check every 6 months to your name, so it's good to put a face to a name. In terms of background, I spent 15 years in Russia, originally with the Soros Foundation, and I think I'd like to share with you a comment and also ask a couple questions,
Sure.
if I may. In terms of understanding totalitarian countries like Russia, like China, like the Middle East, there's a little joke, and it goes like this: we all know what the American dream is. What is the Russian dream? To make sure the American dream doesn't come true. So all these technical issues, I think even if we solve one, there's going to be more. And I think the goal is to have a very robust system, right? That we all believe in and that works under a whole bunch of different scenarios. This last election was my first chance to get involved locally, and so I went door to door. I was canvassing, east side, west side. It was so much fun, but it raised a lot of questions. There was a lot of ballots out there. We had the data from the county. A lot of ballots, people weren't there. They moved. What you mentioned in terms of the voting machine sitting in people's living room. The ballots are out there, and there's really no control. Are there better ways that on a physical ballot basis we can audit who's on the list, as well as to confirm, one-to-one what actually happens with it? If I vote, I know that my vote has truly been, counted. Thank you.
Yeah, few things there. Hopefully I'll get them all. You can find out if your vote-by-mail ballot's been returned and counted online. So we do that. In the handout that I gave you, we talk about our list maintenance. In November 2016, we had 220,000 registered voters. We do list maintenance and get changes of addresses from a number of different sources, and today we have about 203,000 registered voters. So those 17,000 registered voters that are no longer registered, they moved somewhere, and hopefully they're going to re-register. So that's how we try not to send ballots out to places where people don't reside anymore. And so that's how we keep control over it. And before I forget, if you, there's a few other changes coming to the June election: conditional voter registration, automatic registration, and before I leave, I want to touch on those too. But any more questions? Did I answer the question, James?
Segue to my question. But before that, there's a story that my mother used to tell that resonates now that we talk about Russian hacking. She said that before the Japanese occupation, I'm from the Philippines, the fisherman, the regular fisherman who hawked fish for a couple of years, turned out to be a high-ranking military person. There's various ways, so I'm really concerned. In fact, my question is, what kind of Russian influence or interference can be manifested in our local elections? And to my mind, I want to see by hand how many vote, how many here actually go to the voting places to vote? I never vote by mail, and that is my main concern. Why, to my mind, when I became an American citizen, the right to vote is a responsibility that we should be proud about. I never have voted by mail, and that's one way we can secure our ballot. So, as a citizen, as a concerned community organizer, I really urge people, and I don't know, even if, how many are paper-based voting around the country, Joe? Do you know?
just from what I heard this morning on television, there are 9 states that use electronic voting machines. And so, the other 41, I believe, are using paper ballots. But those 9 states, I think the federal government's really going to move to try and make them go to all paper-based voting. That's really the most. Somebody in Russia can't hack this, and. Yeah. So if you mail your vote by mail ballot, we check the signatures. We verify them against the signatures on your voter registration card. Bottom line, if somebody really, really wants to cast a fraudulent vote, they can. They can walk into a polling place and sign their neighbor's name and vote a ballot. But we've never had that happen. We've never had a voter walk in and say, "Who signed my name there? That wasn't me." And then when we let people know, if your signature did not match on your vote by mail ballot, we send you a notice. Your signature didn't match. Come on back in and correct it. Or there's no signature on this vote by mail. Can you come back in and sign your vote by mail ballot? And, some people choose not to do that. But we've never had someone come in and say, "Well, I didn't send my ballot in." So we're not seeing much, if any, evidence that there's much fraud going on. Is there another question?
What would happen if you did?
The question is?
What would happen if somebody did come in and say, "Hey"?
If the question is, what would happen if someone did come in and say, "Hey, that's not my signature, I didn't vote," we would go to the DA, and then we would investigate it and find out who that was if we could. And then that person would be allowed to vote. The one, I've seen a couple instances of fraud. One is where you had a parent sign their kid's vote by mail ballot. That's a no-no. Now, you get a letter from the district attorney, you try and do that, and we don't count it. Saw one that was really distressing where it was somebody who wasn't a citizen. They came in and they went, "Oh my gosh, I thought it was okay to register and vote, and I voted. I am so sorry, can you remove my name from the rolls?" Yeah, we did, and then we contacted the DA and they prosecuted that person. That person will never be a US citizen. I know, it's horrible, 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 horrible. But that's, it's the law, and that's why it just doesn't happen. You're not seeing it on any scale, especially in today's climate, Well, we're over here. And I'll be around afterwards if you have a question.
Well, thank you, Joe, but I was going to ask you or let you know something that happened to me that was almost fraud. Because in 2014, I believe, or whenever I was registered to vote, on Haley, and then somebody registered. Then I was going to make sure I was registered in the right district, because remember how we had districts and I had moved. But I started getting stuff where this homeless guy had registered to vote at my address at 209 West Coast. And so I went, "Whoa, what the bleep did you do?" So I just voted. It was too late to change, so I voted at my old address on Haley. And I was hoping, I wonder if it got. He didn't vote because it was vote by mail. But you see, I voted at my old address, and now I want to know, that's one of the reasons I came today, is how to register again in the right precinct.
So to register again in the right precinct, just fill out one of those voter registration cards with your correct address on there, and we'll move it from your old address to the new address.
Oh, hi. My name is Caroline, and I wanted to first say thank you so much for being here and for speaking to us. I have had a concern about our elections process, and that is with vote by mail. I understood your question. To me, it doesn't seem like as secure a process as actually going to a polling place where your name is on a list and you're checked off the list and you're given your ballot. You go in a little, I remember when I was a little girl, I used to stand next to my dad. You pull a little curtain behind you and it's all anonymous and you push the, you know, and there are a lot of ballots out there, and who knows who's filling those ballots out, who knows exactly to where they're going. It just seems like a process that's kind of fraught with ability to commit fraud. And I know the person signs the back, but gosh, comparing every single signature, 320,000, you know, and in the court you have handwriting experts that make sure that it isn't forged signatures. To me, it just seems like a process that has a lot of potential for fraud. And you say, well, we're not seeing it, but maybe you're not looking for it, and that's why you're not seeing it. So it just doesn't seem as secure a process. A lot of ballots out there. Who knows if there's coercion? Who knows if people don't know for what they're voting? They just kind of mark something. It doesn't seem like a very secure process, is all I'm saying. There's room for improvement. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and obviously if there's coercion out there in someone's house, we can't tell, but we do check all those signatures. And if we see they don't match, and like I said, we've actually contacted a parent who it's real obvious signed the ballot for their kid or something like that. And we see it and we follow up on it. So we do take it extremely seriously.
Dr. Borden, I wonder if what your opinion is about whether or not the Russian interference affected the election in 2016.
That has not been proven. However, in 4 of the 5 key voting states, Trump at the very last minute won by 1% of the vote. And this was prior to a fusillade of fake news put out in those states by Russian accounts. So one would think that it's quite possible, but we do not have real proof of it yet.
I want to ask you about the issue of voting by mail. One of the some mail can get lost, and there's some mail that would arrive at the I don't know what you call it, your office or the polling place after the election is over. I have personally had an issue with that, with mail that I sent out and didn't get to the destination for a month. And this is the issue of voting but not being able to have your vote counted. Could you discuss this issue and whether or not there are ways to get around it?
So we contract with the United States Post Office so that we can keep track of the ballots and where they are through their process. On our website and through the Secretary of State's website now, you can find out if your ballot has been received and counted, or if it's been not counted because it didn't have a signature, or the signature didn't match. The laws recently changed where it's postmarked +3 in California, so that if your ballot is postmarked on election day, that we can count it if we receive it within 3 days of the election. So it used to be that we would get dozens upon dozens of ballots the day after the election, which to me was kind of heartbreaking. So that's changed. So the Secretary of State's really concerned about this. They've just put in place, and I've been working on a committee for a statewide voter registration database. And what I've encouraged the Secretary of State to do, and I know Hannah Beth Jackson was actually offering up some legislation on this, where statewide, broken down by county, there would be a report on the Secretary of State's website indicating which counties had ballots that were not going to be counted and why. So were they too late? Did they not have a signature? Did they have 2 ballots in 1 envelope? That kind of thing. So I'm hopeful, it may not be up by June, but I'm hopeful that there's going to be greater transparency to find out if your ballot actually got counted. It's a small percentage of ballots that we receive and don't count for those various reasons, but even a small percentage concerns me. And that's why, again, another thing I instituted was, hey, your signature doesn't match. It's a week before the election. We send them a letter. Now, you know, think about that. I'm going to send you a letter saying we're not going to count your ballot because your signature doesn't match. And are you going to be happy about that? Aren't you going to come into my office and say, what the heck? Well, yeah, you come in and say, what the heck? And then we show you the ballot and you go, oh, damn, I got really sloppy on that signature, didn't I? So, you know, it's important that you sign your ballot correctly. We don't get a lot of those, but the ones we do, we let people know. And hopefully they can come in and correct it even after the election, and then have that ballot counted. So we're seeing a lot of improvements along all those lines.
And I wanted to know, you mentioned that you do list maintenance. So my question is, how often do you do list maintenance? Is it something you do once a year or every voting time around, you know, you do this? So you update your file. How often is list maintenance done? It's done a number of different ways. So we get a national, and actually in the handout, there's a section under list maintenance. We get national change of address, NCOA is what they call it, and it comes from the, I think, U.S. Post Office. And then once a year, we do a mailing. This is probably our biggest list maintenance, and this is per the election code. We do a mailing to every single voter in the county, and if it comes back as undeliverable, or if the current person living there sends it back and says this person moved, we remove that person from the voting rolls. When I say remove them from the voting rolls, they're moved from the active rolls, which means that we won't send them a sample ballot or put them on a roster. But if they showed up at a polling place and voted, their ballot would be counted because they were on the registration rolls. They just weren't on, they were just inactivated. So we would still allow them to vote. And the automatic registration, which takes place April 16th of 2018, so in just a couple weeks, it's called the New Motor Voter, and that's where if you go into the Department of Motor Vehicles and change your address because you moved, and most people when they move, they do change their driver's license. They're not really so quick to change their voter registration. But when you change your driver's license address, it's going to automatically update your voter registration. If you go to apply for a license, even if you're 16 years old, and I went in on my 16th birthday to get my driver's license, you will automatically be registered to vote. You will not be able to vote until your 18th birthday, and then that's when I send you out a little happy birthday card. So automatic registration is going to keep the voting rolls clean. We do a number of different mailings. You can register to vote and change your address online at CalVoter. List maintenance is a really important thing for me, and for counties where you have a major university, the students move every year. My son went to UCSB, lived in Ivy. He literally moved every single year. So we had to change his address every year in our voter registration rolls.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Question is, what is being done to protect the main servers? I heard that Anonymous, the group Anonymous, had to put a firewall around the main server to protect it because it was so hackable, and that's how Obama won second term, because they put that firewall. And also, what about the fact that the machines, the electronic voting machines, are owned by individuals, companies? I heard Mitt Romney's son bought Sequoia or Debo, one of the companies. What's to protect them? They can put software in the machines and flip votes, and that's my question. 2 questions, thank you.
So the servers, so our server for voting tabulation is not hooked up to the internet. So you don't need a firewall. We have a real wall to, and then for the biggest concern really with servers is our voter registration database, and because that needs to be outward facing so that you can, change your registration online, all that kind of stuff. So creating good firewalls and good protocols around that is very important. We monitor the voter registration activity to make sure that, that nothing's going on. And then finally, with regards to the voting machines, that's why paper, because we can check that paper and no one can question it. And if anybody does question, what we do from time to time, if we get a close election, like 2 to 3 votes for, let's say, a city council or supervisor, what we actually do, we don't tell anybody, but we go in and actually manually recount that before we get it, so that when the candidate comes in and goes, oh, I lost by 3 votes, I want to recount. Well, you can do the recount, but guess what? We already did it. And because recounts are very expensive, but we are as concerned about the integrity of the process as anybody. And when I have the ability to pay for really making sure that that 3-vote difference is the right difference, I'll do what I can to do that.
Hi. It sounds like Santa Barbara has been ahead of the game in being proactive about a lot of the security such. But what I'm wondering is about the rest of California, because I believe we were one of the states that was part of the 21 that was pinged by the Russians for trying to look at our systems. Do you know, and can you talk about any matters that came to light through the Homeland Security speaking with the state of California?
Yes, the Secretary of State's taken all that very, very seriously. You're right to use the word pinged, because they weren't hacked. They were really, the proper word I think is scanned. So they tried to get in and do something, but they really weren't able to do anything. The Department of Homeland Security can tell, because they know who some of these bad actors are, and they can tell if a bad actor's been trying to do something. So, no, we're constantly doing things, and like this recent contract we have with DHS to come into Santa Barbara County, other counties are doing that too. And so, all I can tell you, it's a never-ending process. We're never, ever going to be perfect. You just can't be. Security doesn't work that way. So, no, yeah, the Secretary of State and the rest of the counties are taking it very seriously. Maybe they weren't as far ahead of the curve as I've been, but yeah, they take it seriously.
Joe, I'd like to say at this point, you point out that no system is perfect, and your system is a very good one, but it's not perfect. It would be more nearly perfect if more people voted. the more honest ballots you get, the less fraudulent ballots count. And I think that's a point to be made about mail ballots. If you got everybody who could vote voting by mail ballot, the fraudulent ballots would not matter.
Good point.
I wanted to, I have this picture in my mind of people comparing signatures of the ballots that come in, and you say that they get compared. And I cannot imagine the logistics of having a person do that. So I'm wondering, is there a machine that puts, calls up the original signature and is compared electronically, or how does that work?
Yeah, yes, there is a machine that does it, and it gets about 60%, I'm going to say, of the signatures. It says, oh, these are good, these are good. And you look at them. I've gone through, looked at them, yeah, they're good, And then the other 40%, it's really cool. We've got this system set up where the other 40% people actually look at. You actually have human beings looking at it. And it pulls up on the computer screen 4 different voters at a time with their original signature and their vote by mail signature, so that a person can go, okay, those 4 look good, those 4 look good, whoops, there's one there that doesn't look good, so I'm going to take these 3. We're going to, that one that doesn't look good, it gets kicked up a level to a supervisor, and so the process actually really goes fast. And I give tours of the office when we get into the vote by mail mode, and it's really cool. So we'll get like 4,000 vote by mail ballots in the morning, and by 10 o'clock and then by noon, they're into our system, and the rest of the state of California knows that those people have voted, and it's in VoteCal, and you could actually go into VoteCal and look it up, except for the ones where we don't accept the signature.
Excuse me, you said that you look at the original signature. When was that original signature? I've been voting since I was 21, but my handwriting has changed drastically.
Shame on you. Again, if the signature is not matching, we send you a letter and ask you to come in and update your voter registration card. It's important that you keep your signature healthy. Voting's too important.
Hi. I have an elderly friend who has essential tremor and is not able to sign even for a credit card. Does she lose her right to vote?
No, she doesn't lose her right to vote. She can request to have someone put an X. She can put an X, or even if she can't, she can have somebody else assist her with that. There's a certain protocol for it, which I don't know all the ins and outs of, but no, she absolutely can still vote. She just needs to call our office or have someone call our office for her, explain the situation, and we will set it up. We've even had cases where somebody can't get to vote on election day. We'll send out our staff. Get them a ballot here, So, yeah, just have someone call her office. She can definitely vote.
I just wanted to ask real quick, because I was talking to you before we started about same-day voter registration. Can you talk a little bit about that? And because that's going to be new, I think you said starting in June. And then what you foresee coming after down the road, will we eventually be able to do that at any polling place?
Yeah, so I just gave a talk at the Future California Elections on it's called conditional voter registration. In 2009, I was working with the Secretary of State to put in place something called same-day registration. My biggest concern back then with the proposed legislation was that out at UCSB, you're going to have all these kids, they're going to procrastinate and not register to vote until election day, and I pictured these really huge long lines and having these kids disenfranchised. So we worked with the Secretary of State and got them to put in that you can have voter registration after the cutoff, the 15-day cutoff,
but it has to be at the permanent office of the elections official. So in Santa Barbara County, we have 3 permanent offices, unlike many counties, one in Lompoc, one in Santa Maria, and one in Santa Barbara. And conditional voter registration became law in 2012, I think, but it was predicated on the Secretary of State having a statewide voter registration database fully implemented according to HAVA. So he did that in October 2016, and so the January 1st after that, conditional voter registration became the law. So we've had it in California now since January 1, 2017. But June is going to be the first real election a statewide election where we've had conditional voter registration, which allows people to vote 14 days before the election, all the way up into on election day. I believe that it's going to come to a point sometime in the next few years where that's going to transition into same-day registration, which would mean that it could be at any polling place. But there are, I think, 5 or 7 counties, I forget, that are now going to the Colorado model of voting, but in California, where everybody in the county will get a vote-by-mail ballot. You'll no longer have polling places, but you'll have vote centers open before Election Day where you can go and register to vote and get a replacement ballot. If you lost your vote-by-mail ballot, you'll be able to drop off your vote-by-mail ballot. Under the current formula, Santa Barbara County would have to have 25 vote centers or 23 vote centers open the 4 days before Election Day, so Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, across the county, and everybody would get a vote-by-mail ballot. In Colorado, it's pretty much been proven that leads to an overall increased turnout. So that's what they like about it, and in my mind, it makes it a lot easier for people to vote because they can go in on Saturday, or if we have the vote center at a church, maybe that's where they go to church. They can, drop off their vote-by-mail ballot on Sunday, and so it's going to be interesting. There's 5 counties I think, that are piloting it. I chose not to do that in Santa Barbara County right now, just because there's too much other stuff going on with automatic registration, conditional voter registration, a statewide voter registration database. And I've been working on developing that with the state, on developing that statewide voter registration database, and it needs to be to the level where if you were registered in San Luis Obispo as a vote-by-mail voter, let's say, but you moved to Santa Barbara 5 days before the election, you would be able to walk into a Santa Barbara vote center, and we would have the capacity there to see that you had not cast a ballot in San Luis Obispo and would be able to accept your ballot here and make sure that you were not trying to vote twice. So there's been a lot of change. There's going to be a lot of change coming into the future, and it's my job to make sure it's all secure as we go through this change.
Okay. Thank you and Dr. Borden for exemplary presentations, really fine. My question or hope is probably pie in the sky about change. It feels to me that having one Tuesday voting day is punitive. Seriously, when you look at other countries, in some countries it's a holiday, some countries it's a weekend long, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any hope at all for that movement here?
Well, and that's where this vote center concept comes in, because then everybody has a vote-by-mail ballot 29 days before the election, so everybody can vote over a 29-day period. Plus, then you would have these 4-day vote centers. There'd be 23 of them scattered all across the county where you could go in and vote 4 days before the election. It's interesting, the concept of voting on a holiday
It sounds really good, but from my perspective, guess what? Now you have to pay overtime. There's all sorts of labor laws involved with it. So the holiday thing is really difficult to implement. I would work for more 4-day voting. Thank you all. It was fun.
I think it's just amazing that we have such an expert here, although that's his job, but it's just really wonderful. So thank you so much, Joe, and thank you to Dr. Borden, and thank you for coming. May you stay safe, huh?